Ryan Walker had spent the last 8 years believing that his life was over long before his heart stopped beating. Ever since the tragic loss of his wife, every day had followed the same exhausting rhythm. Early mornings, school lunches, office deadlines, grocery runs, bedtime stories, and the quiet loneliness waiting for him after his 9-year-old daughter finally fell asleep. He wasn't looking for love. He wasn't searching for a second chance. As far as Ryan was concerned, his purpose was simple: be a good father to Emily and survive one day at a time. But children often see truths that adults spend years trying to hide. Emily saw the sadness in her father's eyes when he thought nobody was watching. She noticed how silent the house became after dinner, how he smiled for her, but never for himself. So when a friend convinced Ryan to finally go on a blind date, Emily secretly slipped a folded drawing into the pocket of his jacket before he left, along with a handwritten note that read, "Be kind to her. Maybe she's lonely too." Ryan smiled when he found it later, assuming it was nothing more than the sweet imagination of a little girl. What he didn't know was that this small piece of paper was about to unravel a mystery neither of them could explain. The evening began normally enough. His date, Lena Carter, was warm, intelligent, and carrying a sadness that somehow felt familiar. For the first time in years, Ryan found himself enjoying a conversation. Then everything changed. As he reached into his pocket to pay the bill, Emily's drawing slipped onto the table. Lena picked it up. The color drained from her face. Her hands trembled. For several long seconds, she stared at the picture as though she had seen a ghost. Then she slowly leaned across the table and whispered 5 chilling words that made Ryan's blood run cold. "Your daughter helped draw this." Ryan froze. The restaurant noise faded into the background. His heart pounded as he stared at the woman sitting across from him. Because there was only one impossible problem with what she had just said. Lena had never met Emily. And yet somehow, hidden inside 2 children's drawings, was a connection that would force 2 lonely strangers to confront the pain they had buried for years, uncover a secret neither family understood, and discover that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of an entire life. 8 years had passed since Ryan Walker buried his wife, yet grief still lived inside his home, like an invisible guest that never left. It lingered in the quiet corners of the kitchen during early mornings, sat beside him in the driver's seat during long commutes, and waited patiently at the foot of his bed every night when the world finally became still. Time had softened the sharpest edges of the pain, but it had never truly taken it away. Instead, grief had settled into something quieter, something heavier, a constant companion he carried everywhere without speaking about it. Most people who knew Ryan believed he had moved on. After all, he smiled when he needed to. He showed up to work every day. He paid his bills on time. He attended school events, soccer practices, and parent-teacher conferences. From the outside, he looked like a man who had survived tragedy and rebuilt his life. What nobody understood was that survival and living were 2 completely different things. Ryan had mastered survival. Living was another matter entirely. Every weekday morning began at 5:45 a.m. The alarm buzzed beside his bed, and he immediately reached out to silence it before it could wake Emily. Then he would lie there for a few seconds staring at the ceiling, gathering enough strength to face another day. On the dresser across the room stood a framed photograph taken 11 years earlier. In the picture, Ryan was younger, laughing openly while his wife Sarah leaned against him with her arm around his waist. 3-year-old Emily sat between them, wearing a crooked birthday crown. Ryan rarely looked directly at the photograph anymore. Some mornings he couldn't bear it. Other mornings he couldn't stop himself. This morning was one of the latter. His eyes drifted toward the frame. For a moment, he remembered Sarah's laugh. He remembered the way she used to sing badly while making breakfast. He remembered how easily happiness had once existed in their home. Then he forced himself out of bed. There wasn't time to dwell on memories. There never was. By 6:30, he was already making pancakes while packing Emily's lunch. By 7 o'clock, he was gently knocking on her bedroom door. "Rise and shine, kiddo." Emily groaned dramatically beneath her blankets. 5 more minutes. Ryan smiled despite himself. "That's what you said 10 minutes ago. I'm negotiating." Terrible negotiators don't get pancakes. Her head immediately appeared from beneath the covers. "You made pancakes? Chocolate chip. You're the best dad ever." She launched herself out of bed and nearly tripped over her own feet. Ryan laughed. The sound surprised him. Genuine laughter had become rare enough that he noticed it whenever it happened. Moments like these were the reason he kept going. Emily had inherited Sarah's bright eyes, her stubbornness, and her ability to find joy in the smallest things. She was the center of Ryan's universe. Every decision he made revolved around her happiness, her safety, her future. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped making decisions for himself altogether. Later that afternoon, Ryan sat at his desk on the 22nd floor of an architecture firm overlooking downtown Chicago. His co-workers chatted near the coffee machine while he focused on a set of construction plans. He preferred it that way. Work was predictable. Blueprints made sense. Buildings followed rules. People were complicated. Relationships were messy. Solitude was simpler. Ryan. He looked up to find Jennifer Brooks standing beside his desk. Jennifer had worked with him for nearly 10 years. She was one of the few people persistent enough to challenge his walls. Please tell me you're not staying late again. Ryan glanced at the clock. There's still work to finish. Jennifer crossed her arms. There's always work to finish. That's kind of how jobs work. She rolled her eyes. You know exactly what I mean. Ryan returned his attention to the plans. He already knew where this conversation was heading. Jennifer had spent years trying to convince him to start dating again. She considered it a personal mission. I met someone, she announced. Ryan groaned immediately. No, you haven't even heard me out. I don't need to. She's smart. No. Funny. Jennifer. Beautiful. Absolutely not. She sighed dramatically. One dinner. Ryan rubbed his temples. We've had this conversation before. And I'll keep having it. Why? Jennifer's expression softened. Because you're lonely. The answer landed harder than Ryan expected. For a second, he couldn't respond. Jennifer rarely spoke so directly. I'm fine, he finally said. No. You're functioning. That's not the same thing. Ryan stared at her. Jennifer held his gaze without backing down. 8 years, Ryan. 8 years is a long time to spend pretending you don't need anyone. He wanted to argue. He wanted to dismiss her concerns and return to work. Instead, he found himself thinking about the empty side of his bed, the silent house after Emily went to sleep, the countless evenings spent sitting alone with a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. Jennifer saw the hesitation. Just dinner, she said gently. Nothing more. Ryan looked away first. I'll think about it. Jennifer smiled triumphantly. That's the closest thing to a yes I've gotten in years. That evening, Ryan picked Emily up from soccer practice. The sun was setting as they drove home. Emily talked nonstop about school friends and a science project involving volcanoes. Ryan listened carefully, asking questions whenever she paused for breath. He never wanted her to feel ignored. Sarah used to say that children remembered attention more than gifts. Ryan had never forgotten that lesson. They stopped for ice cream on the way home. Emily chose strawberry. Ryan ordered black coffee instead. You know that's not ice cream, right? Emily said suspiciously. Pretty sure it is. Nope. That's old people ice cream. Ryan laughed. Old people ice cream? She nodded seriously. Mom used to say coffee tastes like sadness. The words hit him unexpectedly. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Sarah's name still carried weight inside the car even after all these years. Emily stared down at her cone. I miss her today. Ryan swallowed hard. Me too. She nodded. That was one thing they had always promised each other. No pretending. No hiding grief. If they missed Sarah, they said so. If they were sad, they admitted it. It didn't make the pain disappear, but it made it easier to carry. That night, after dinner and homework and an argument about bedtime that Emily inevitably lost, Ryan sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. He opened his laptop and attempted to focus on work. 20 minutes later, he realized he had been staring at the same email the entire time. His eyes drifted toward the hallway. Emily's bedroom light was still glowing beneath the door. Curious, he walked over and knocked softly. You awake? Maybe. Ryan opened the door. Emily sat cross-legged on her bed surrounded by colored pencils and sketchbooks. Drawing had become her favorite hobby. It's past bedtime. I know. Then why are you still awake? She hesitated. Can I ask you something? Ryan sat beside her. Anything. Emily studied him carefully. There was something unusually serious in her expression. Are you happy? The question caught him off guard. Of course I am. Really? Really? Emily looked unconvinced. You don't smile very much. Ryan attempted a smile. I smile. Not like other dads. He chuckled nervously. You comparing dads now? Sometimes. Her honesty made him laugh again. Then she grew quiet. I think you're lonely. Ryan's heart tightened. Children had an unsettling ability to aim directly at the truth. Why would you think that? He asked gently. Emily shrugged. Because sometimes I hear you walking around the house after I go to bed. Ryan blinked. What? You don't sleep. She looked down at her drawing. Mom used to talk to you at night. Now nobody does. For several seconds, Ryan couldn't find words. The room suddenly felt smaller. Emily wasn't accusing him. She wasn't even sad. She was simply observing something he had spent years trying to hide. I'm okay, Em. You always say that. Her voice softened. But okay isn't the same as happy. Ryan looked away. He suddenly felt exposed in a way that board meetings and deadlines had never made him feel. Emily reached over and squeezed his hand. Such a small gesture. Such an enormous impact. You know Mom wouldn't want you to be lonely forever, right? The lump in Ryan's throat became impossible to ignore. He stared at the floor. Sarah had said something similar once years before her accident. Back when neither of them imagined their future would be cut short. Back when forever still felt guaranteed. Maybe, he whispered. Emily smiled faintly. If someone asked you to go on a date, would you say yes? Ryan immediately laughed. Nice try. That's not an answer. It's absolutely an answer, Dad. He pointed toward her pillow. Bed. Emily groaned dramatically. You're avoiding the question. And you're avoiding sleep. As he stood to leave, she called after him. Think about it. Ryan shook his head and turned off the light. Yet long after Emily fell asleep, her words continued echoing inside his mind. Are you happy? You don't smile very much. Okay isn't the same as happy. Around midnight, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from Jennifer appeared on the screen. One dinner. Saturday, 7 p.m. That's all I'm asking. Ryan stared at the message. Normally, he would have ignored it. Instead, he thought about Emily sitting on her bed with colored pencils scattered around her. He thought about the concern in her young eyes. He thought about the possibility that maybe everyone around him could see something he refused to acknowledge. The loneliness. The emptiness. The life that had slowly shrunk until it contained nothing except work and responsibility. His thumb hovered over the screen. For a full minute, he hesitated. Then, before he could change his mind, he typed 3 simple words. Fine. One dinner. Jennifer's response arrived almost instantly. Finally, Ryan shook his head and set the phone aside. Regret arrived immediately. Yet beneath the regret was something else. Something unfamiliar. Something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't hope. Not exactly. Hope felt too dangerous. Too fragile. But perhaps it was the faintest possibility that life might still contain chapters he hadn't expected. Upstairs, Emily slept peacefully, unaware that a single text message had just set events into motion that would soon change all of their lives forever. Neither of them knew that a simple blind date was about to uncover a mystery hidden within 2 children's drawings, connect 2 broken families in ways that seemed impossible, and force Ryan to confront the one thing he had spent 8 years avoiding. The possibility that his story was not over yet. Saturday arrived faster than Ryan expected. The entire week passed in a strange blur of deadlines, school pickups, grocery lists, and a growing sense of unease that settled in his chest. Whenever he remembered the dinner waiting for him at the end of the week. More than once, he considered canceling. More than once, he picked up his phone, opened Jennifer's messages, and nearly typed an excuse. A work emergency. A family obligation. A sudden illness. Anything would have been easier than walking into a restaurant and sitting across from a stranger for the first time in 8 years. Yet every time he considered backing out, he remembered Emily's face. He remembered the question she had asked. Are you happy? Somehow that question lingered longer than any fear he felt. On Saturday evening, Ryan stood in front of the bathroom mirror adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. The sight felt unfamiliar. He couldn't remember the last time he had dressed for anything other than work or a school event. The man staring back at him looked older than 38. Not because of wrinkles or gray hair, though there were a few of both now. It was something deeper. Years of responsibility had settled into his posture. Loss had carved itself quietly into his expression. Downstairs, Emily appeared at the foot of the staircase and examined him critically. "You look nervous." Ryan laughed. "Do I?" "Very. Thanks for the confidence boost." "You're welcome." Then her expression softened. "I think it's brave." Ryan paused. "Brave?" "Yeah. Doing something scary when you don't want to." He smiled despite himself. Sometimes she sounded far older than 9 years old. "Well, hopefully I survive." "You will." She ran forward and hugged him tightly. Ryan hugged her back. What he didn't notice was Emily quickly slipping a folded piece of paper into the pocket of his jacket while his attention was elsewhere. Her small fingers moved with the precision headed toward the door. Halfway outside, he turned around. Emily was still standing in the hallway watching him. There was something thoughtful in her eyes, something almost hopeful. He waved once before leaving. Neither of them realized how important that folded piece of paper would soon become.